when God made a covenant with Abraham, what do you think Abraham replied? He said, how can I be sure this would happen? Yeah, it's in chapter 15 of Genesis. God promised Abraham, before he was called Abraham, that he would have descendants as many of the stars of heaven. What a thing. And Abraham said, how can I know this will happen? What nerve. If I said I was going to take you out to dinner, and we agreed on a date, and then you said, how can I know that you'll come? Well, I can tell you I wouldn't be very pleased. And so God showed that he could, or that he could, by great display of fireworks, if you like, of his power. So in a sense, there were two questions there. How do I know this will happen? Could be, how do I know that you can do it, that you're capable? And that's how God replied to show his power. But then there's another question which comes later. Can I trust that you will? See, if God is promising all this, why doesn't he just do it instead of promising and going on like that? And I think it's because he needed Abraham to grow in a special relationship with him. God had to form a relationship with Abraham in the sense that Abraham must grow in trust, not only that God can, that God would. And eventually he grew into a really deep trust of God, that God would fulfill his promise, even if his son Isaac was killed. As a human being, we need to grow in a relationship like that. It can't just happen. So if God promises you, or promises me, that when I die, I will go to heaven and be united with God in extreme happiness, that God will take me to himself, and it will be beyond anything I can imagine. What do I say? Prove it? Oh, how can I be sure? Well, I dare say that. If I don't say it in words, perhaps I might feel it sometimes. I must say occasionally it occurs to me, is the whole thing just a lovely dream and nothing there at all? But then I think of it and I say, well, either I can trust God or not. I have to decide. So I've decided I will really trust God and believe that he will fulfill his promises. Then occasionally during this life you will get a glimpse of it. If you can recall time or some times when you've really been touched, you've really felt the presence of God. It might be at the birth of a child, at a funeral, at a wedding, or it may be without any particular great occasion. You're really moved and you know that God has touched you. Value those moments. It happened to the apostles. In the story of the Transfiguration, they were bowled over, they didn't understand, but years later they never forgot it. Something touched them. They were frightened, they saw a vision, and they were quite relieved when it was only Jesus, someone they knew. John, who was one of them, who saw the Transfiguration, he'd had a similar experience a bit earlier on, a year or so perhaps before, we don't know, at Cana in Galilee, when Jesus turned water into wine, and 30 years later, John was saying, we saw his glory. Over a few bottles of wine. No, something touched that man. in a way that he never forgot. Occasionally it may happen much less than that. If you don't mind me saying, yesterday when I was preparing this, I was really trying to sort it out, and it was coming clearer, and then out of the blue I was suddenly moved to pray very much for a friend of mine whose father is very ill. Just say, dearest Jesus, help them. It came so suddenly. Well, that's not one of the big things, but there are, in my life, and in your life, you'll notice times when you've been touched by God. Another of the apostles, Nathaniel, when he first met Jesus, Jesus said how wonderful he was, and Nathaniel said, how do you know me? And he said, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you. Well, simple enough. But Nathaniel was really thunderstruck. He said, you are the Son of God. Presumably something was happening to Nathaniel. Perhaps when he was under the fig tree, he may have had a really touch of God or something like that. And certainly when he realized that Jesus knew it, that nobody could know what was going in his heart, that was a thing he never forgot. These are simply touches that we have of God as we come gradually in our lives into a deeper relationship with him. But you know, when you grow in a deeper relationship with someone, there's less to say about it. You can't really put it into words. If you're married, or been married for quite a long time, and someone asks you, what's your wife or husband like? You would just name one or two superficial things, because you could never put into words the person you have come to know. There's no concept, no idea. In fact, as you grow into a relationship, sometimes you feel it's much deeper than you realized. You grow to know the person more deeply, and it's more difficult to put into words because it's beyond knowing. And this is how we grow into a knowledge of God and our experience of God. A really hidden depth. If you're with someone you really know and love, and for some reason they are in tears, sobbing their heart out. Well, I remember it says in The Little Prince of Saint-Exupéry, the land of tears is such a secret place. If someone's sobbing their heart out, you may want to go there, you can't, you just sit with them. You can't get into their heart. When you love someone and grow deeper into them, then it's beyond words. It's not a thing you can see exactly. In fact, St. Paul says that we may come to know the love of Christ, which is beyond all knowing. I think he means I know him with my heart and I can't put into words. I don't know it, I don't see it, and yet I really know it. One great English mystic called it the cloud of unknowing, of unknowing. I know God by not knowing, in a way. Or St. John of the Cross calls it a night. Not a gloomy night, not something miserable, but because when I come into God and come to know God, I can't see it. I can't have an idea of it. I can't put it into words. I think that sometimes when I pray deeply, I close my eyes. I don't see, I don't hear. It goes beyond that. And yet I come to a knowledge of God. John of the Cross has a lovely poem like that about the night. Upon that sacred night, in secrecy inscrutable to sight, I went without discerning and with no other light, except for that which in my heart was burning. It lit and led me through, more certain than the light of noonday clear, to where one waited near, whose presence well I knew, there where no other presence might appear. O night that was my guide, O darkness dearer than the morning's pride, O night that joined the lover to the beloved bride, transfiguring them each into the other. To be transfigured into Christ, I am changed, I go into Christ, and yet I can't put words to it. That's why he calls it a night. Something I experience rather than see. Once when I was talking to a group of sixth formers, I suggested, what direction would you look towards God? Now, after Holy Communion, I think of God within me, at other times too sometimes. If I'm outside with a beautiful blue sky, I always look up and see God is up there. When I'm in church in front of the Blessed Sacrament, I might feel that God is ahead of me. I could talk to him. And one Muslim girl said, God is all around. And I thought, that's a lovely image. God is all around me. I could almost touch God. Before you were born, when you were in your mother's womb, did you know your mother? You could feel her. You didn't know that it was her. That was your world. You were influenced by her mood, if she was cheerful or sad or upset. You could feel her heartbeat. But really, to know your mother with your heart, you had to be born and come out of that. But before that, she was your world. And I think it's a bit like this with God, almost as if I'm in the womb of God. God is all around me. But I need to be born really to see him and get to know him with my heart. We can see God more now than I could know my mother when I was in the womb. I think when the moment came to be born, it must have been very frightening, comfortably in the womb, having to get out and people handling me and so on. And the day will come when God will say to me, you've got to go out of here now, and I'll say, I'm quite happy, thank you. But the moment will come when I'll go from here into the arms of God, and that will be more wonderful than when I was first put into my mother's arms. God is all around, as my mother was around me before I was born. And I can't always be aware of it. Just sometimes I feel the touch of God. But I open my heart. And when I hear the promises, my reaction will be, I hope, yes, I trust the Lord. Whatever I may feel going and coming, I know that God will fulfill his promises. When I'm in doubt, I pray for that trust. Ask God for that gift. Amen.